Chair, just before to put a finer point on exactly what you said, we actually did publish, and I think it's on our website somewhere, from the Attorney General's office, a piece that explained our authority with regard to this exact issue that I think was attached to a letter that we sent to Secretary Merrill dealing with BDCP. He had asked a whole host of questions on behalf of water users. So the idea that we haven't yet vetted our so-called defense of whether or not we have authority isn't true. It's out there. And again, at the May meeting, as part of the response to comments, you will see that in even a more developed way.
Yeah, Chris, I didn't say you didn't do it. I said it's ready, it's out there, it's ready. But having another conversation along the lines of what Councilwoman Gray said was we need to see it more in conjunction with this. That was the issue.
Thank you, Mr. Zlotnick.
The one last thing I wanted to say in response to Mr. Zlotnick's comments is it's not like nobody in the Delta is going to be in compliance with this policy. You know, Mr. Zuckerman's comments were about agricultural water suppliers, and the example he gave were, riparians and other appropriators who are smaller users that don't rise to the level of being water suppliers. But certainly the urban areas, West Sacramento comes to mind to me, living in Davis, have got probably water use that's at the level where they would be urban water suppliers and would be complying with this policy.
Okay, members, having Judge Damrell, have you had any reflections about your appointment as a result of this?
Give him a few more hours.
A few more hours, and he'll shoot us all. Okay. All right, members, let's go back on this one. The first change noted by staff, page 3, top of the page, right-hand side, first dot, is to delete these two sections which have no regulatory effect, but insert them into the Delta Plan narrative. Ms. Gray.
May I make some comments before you?
Oh, sure.
This item has always been kind of a hotbed of discussion and continues to be, so you can see the importance of it, but I think a lot of it has to do with interpretation and looking at what may happen in the future. I do think the language, the changes that staff has made thus far is useful, and I want to thank Randy and Pat that tried to put together some language, and I think it was good language and compromise. But at the time that this was up for approval, I did oppose it, I continue to oppose it, and I wanted to make some comments to go on record as to why. Because this policy continues to assert that a transfer, and again, this is my interpretation, exerts that a transfer or export of water can't happen unless a wholesale water agency proves that every water supplier in its district is implementing all programs and projects in their urban and ag management plan. And for what I can understand, wholesale water agencies do not have any authority to do this and cannot be responsible for this. And so my question is, if the council doesn't have authority over these actions, over these water suppliers, unless they individually have a covered action that is appealed, is that right? Is that correct? Is that a correct statement?
Martha, you want to respond to that?
Is what a correct statement?
I need to make sure I understand the
question. This is a covered action. We got it, Mr. Stevens? I got that right. It's a covered action. Attorney General agrees, covered action. Okay, there has to be a covered action. Okay.
I think that's that impression overstates the effect of the policy, because if I understood correctly what you said, it was that if any of the retailers that might be supplied by a wholesaler with a contract served by exports hadn't carried out all of the projects in their water management plans, then a transfer to the wholesaler couldn't be approved. And the trigger here is not that there's any failure. It's that the failure is so significant that it causes the need for the export or the transfer of the project. So it's hard, maybe it's conceivable you've got urban water supplier's got a wholesale contract from one of the exporters who's got a single or maybe a handful of water retailers and they're out of compliance, and they're so bad about it that it forces the wholesaler to go back to the Delta for water. I have a hard time imagining who that would be. I think most cases, we've got most retailers, most districts, they're doing what they can, and they're working with their wholesalers to get the program done, and the big wholesalers like Met and like the Contra Costa, the Santa Clara Water Agency are working with their retailers to develop water management plans and seeing that they're implemented. And so I think that would be very unlikely. But if so many of them were out of compliance, that they had to come to the Delta for more water when they could have just done what they'd already promised to do in their own plans, that would be a pretty significant situation, I would think. I mean, have I got that mischaracterized?
No, I think you've got it right.
Mr. Johnston.
Mr. Chairman, you were going to summarize.
I was just going to go through these items. Is there any objection to deletion of these two paragraphs from the regulatory section? And the language will be inserted at some appropriate location in the Delta plan. Is there any objection to that?
Let me make a suggestion.
Randy.
Why don't you consider all the points? If no one has any objection, we can get through it quicker.
Okay, let's do that. Let's do that. Is that okay?
Yeah, I just need a clarification on another.
Yeah, we have one notation that Mr. Mills had raised a definitional question the staff was going to examine. So with that notation, Don, you had a...
Yeah, I want to be sure that I'm reading this correctly. It's C2, capital C2 down, we're talking about programs and projects that reduce reliance. In the word underlined groundwater, and is that read all as one phrase, groundwater conjunctive use projects involving various water supplies? Is that all one, or is groundwater by itself, or what?
Yeah, I had a slightly different point on the various water supplies, but I would ask the
What does that
staff
mean?
to look at that to clarify it. I just don't understand.
Is that one phrase, supposed to be one phrase, though?
That
Or is
would
it
be
supposed-
one phrase, yeah.
So what are you intending? Groundwater conjunctive use projects involving various water supplies. What's
I think that's a conjunctive use project in which groundwater is used together with other water supplies.
what kind of water is there? You mean recycled water, surface water? I mean, is that what you're? No.
Conjunctive use projects could be, there could be a variety of different water supplies. It could be surface water, it can be recycled water, it can be storm water. There's different types of water supplies. We've had different people saying, well, what about my project that has this type of water versus another type of water?
So it's a conjunctive use. That doesn't cover it? That's misunderstood, conjunctive use?
That would be the way I would lean.
Okay, well,
I think
anyway,
it does.
I guess staff could take a look. I was curious as what that was intended.
Well, let's do this. With the motion we take, Mr. Mills' language will be reviewed by staff. And let's have this phrase reviewed to see if some clarification couldn't be made. Mr. Johnston? So move the staff recommendations on WRP1 as indicated with the two notes on Mr. Mills and the phrase that's just been raised by Mr. Natoli. Okay, is there a second? Second, Mr. Fiorini. Okay, starting with Mr. Johnston.
Gray now.
Fiorini, aye.
Eisenberg, aye.
Totally aye.
Okay, 4-1, that is approved. Okay, members, turn, if you would, please, to page 4. At the top of the page, WRP2, Transparency in Water Contracting. I don't think there are any policy changes, so Mr. Ray, why don't you breeze through that one? And if we have anyone who wants to talk on transparency, Pat?
Yeah, this is not a policy that attracted a lot of attention. We had comments from the Contra Costa Water District, East Bay Mud, the San Luis, and the State Water Contractors, and the Environmental Water Caucus, actually, as well as from the Department of Water Resources and the Bureau of Reclamation. And the responses we're proposing are technical changes that respond to comments from DWR asking that...
Let's see what